Most people believe they understand prison. They think they know what a normal day looks like behind bars. They imagine inmates waking up late, killing time, eating bad food, watching television, and counting down the hours until lights out. They picture prison as boring, loud, sometimes violent, but ultimately simple, a place where time just drags on. That belief couldn't be further from the truth, because there is nothing simple about a normal day in a U.S. prison. In fact, the most dangerous thing about prison life isn't violence, isolation, or even long sentences. It's the routine, the structure, the invisible system that quietly takes control of every hour, every movement, and every decision, until the person living inside it no longer recognizes what freedom of choice feels like. A normal prison day is not random. It is not flexible. It is not accidental. It is engineered. Every sound, every command, every delay, and every silence exists for a reason. Prison doesn't just confine bodies, it manages behavior. It doesn't simply lock doors, it controls time. And it doesn't rely on constant force. It relies on repetition, predictability, and pressure. This is the part the public rarely sees. Because from the outside, prison looks stable, organized, controlled. But from the inside, that control is relentless. It begins before an inmate even opens their eyes and doesn't release its grip until the final count of the night. There is no ease into the day in prison. There is no waking up when your body is ready. No deciding to stay still for 5 more minutes. No choosing silence over noise. The day begins when the institution decides it begins. Lights come on suddenly, harsh, bright, and non-negotiable. Metal doors echo across concrete tiers. Voices cut through half-sleep, calling numbers, not names. And in that moment, the inmate is reminded of the first rule of prison life. You do not control your own time. From that first command forward, the system takes over completely. Every action that follows, standing, dressing, lining up, eating, working, walking, waiting, is governed by someone else's clock. And the most powerful part of this system isn't how strict it is. It's how quickly it becomes normal. After a few days, inmates stop questioning the schedule. After a few weeks, they stop expecting explanations. After a few months, many stop remembering that life was ever different. That's how prison works. It doesn't need to punish constantly. It doesn't need to yell all the time. It simply repeats the same controlled day again and again until resistance fades into routine. On paper, a prison schedule looks harmless. Wake up, count, breakfast, movement, work, count, dinner, lockdown, sleep. But that schedule hides something important. Every part of it is designed to test patience, obedience, and endurance. Delays are intentional. Waiting is deliberate. Silence is enforced. Movement is restricted not just physically, but psychologically. Even boredom serves a purpose. When inmates are forced to wait without knowing how long, for food, for movement, for release from a cell, the uncertainty wears them down. When schedules change without warning, it reinforces the idea that control never belongs to the inmate. When rules are enforced inconsistently, it creates anxiety. When they are enforced rigidly, it creates helplessness. Either way, the system wins. This is why prison doesn't feel loud all the time. It feels heavy. The weight of routine presses down day after day, stripping away autonomy piece by piece. You no longer decide when to eat. You no longer decide when to shower. You don't even decide when you're allowed to stand up or sit down. Even conversations are timed. Even silence is regulated. And if you move too early, that's a violation. If you move too late, that's a problem. If you hesitate, question, or forget, the consequences stack up. Not always violently, not always immediately, but always predictably. Because prison discipline doesn't have to be dramatic to be effective. It just has to be consistent. This is what most documentaries miss. They focus on extreme cases, riots, fights, lockdowns, high-security units. But those moments are rare. What actually defines prison life is the day that looks boring from the outside, the day that repeats over and over, quietly shaping behavior. That day is where the real control happens. The inmate learns quickly that resisting the schedule doesn't bring freedom, it brings problems. Complaints disappear into paperwork. Requests take weeks. Time stretches. And eventually, many stop trying. Not because they agree with the system, but because survival inside it depends on adaptation. Prison teaches patience through exhaustion, compliance through repetition, silence through consequence. And the most unsettling part is how efficiently it works. To correctional staff, this is simply order. To administrators, it's policy. To the system, it's success. But to the people living inside it, this normal day becomes a slow erasure of control over their own lives. This documentary is not about the worst prisons in America. It's not about rare punishment or headline-making cases. It's about the average prison, the average inmate, the average day, the day that starts before sunrise, the day that is measured in counts and commands, the day that ends the same way it begins, with a locked door. We will follow that day in detail. From wake up to the first count, from morning movement to controlled meals, from work assignments to forced waiting, from afternoon fatigue to evening lockdown, from the final count to the silence that settles over concrete and steel. Because once you understand how a normal prison day works, you understand the real power of the system. Prison doesn't just take away freedom, it replaces it. And by the end of this documentary, you won't look at the phrase, "a normal day in prison," the same way again. Before we begin, tap like, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us uncover the darkest corners of the prison system. Now let's step inside. A normal day in a U.S. prison does not begin with sunlight. It begins with authority. Long before most of the outside world is awake, the prison has already decided that the day must start. Inmates do not wake up naturally. They are awakened. And that distinction matters more than most people realize. Inside prison, wake up is not a personal moment. It is not gradual. It is not quiet. It is the first reminder of the day that control does not belong to the individual. It belongs to the institution. Lights come on suddenly, often without warning. In many facilities, they are bright, fluorescent, and harsh, designed to eliminate shadows and leave nowhere for the eyes to rest. The timing is not negotiable. Whether an inmate slept poorly, is sick, exhausted, or mentally overwhelmed makes no difference. The schedule does not adjust. The day begins because the system says it does. Almost immediately, sound follows light. Metal doors rattle. Radios crackle. Boots echo across concrete floors. Voices cut through the tears, calling out commands that have been repeated so many times they barely sound like words anymore. This is not conversation. It is instruction. Stand for count. Those 3 words carry enormous weight. Count is the foundation of prison control. It is how the institution confirms that every body is present, accounted for, and still under authority. Missing a count is not a small issue. It triggers alarms, investigations, lockdowns, and discipline. That's why count comes first, before breakfast, before work, before anything resembling personal choice. At count time, inmates must stand exactly where they are required to stand. In some facilities, this means standing at the cell door. In others, it means standing beside the bunk. Hands visible, body still, eyes forward. No movement unless instructed. Even posture matters. Too relaxed can be interpreted as disrespect. Too slow can be interpreted as noncompliance. Too early can be interpreted as suspicious. There is a narrow window of acceptable behavior, and inmates learn quickly where that line is. The count itself may take minutes, but the pressure begins instantly. Officers walk the tier, visually confirming each inmate. They do not call names. They count bodies. This is one of the most subtle psychological shifts prison enforces. Identity becomes numerical. You are present or absent. Nothing more. If the count is delayed, and delays are common, inmates must remain standing. Sometimes for several minutes. Sometimes longer. No explanation is required. Waiting is part of the process. This is the first test of the day. Can you stand quietly? Can you wait without reacting? Can you submit without complaint? Because every day, the system asks those same questions. Once count clears, movement may be allowed, or it may not. That decision belongs entirely to staff and facility conditions. In some prisons, inmates are released immediately for breakfast. In others, they return to their bunks and wait again. Sometimes doors open. Sometimes they don't. There is rarely an explanation. This uncertainty is intentional. When inmates don't know what comes next, they stop expecting predictability. When expectations disappear, compliance becomes easier. The system does not need to explain itself. It simply needs to function. Breakfast, when it comes, is not a meal in the traditional sense. It is another controlled movement. Inmates line up when told. They move when told. They stop when told. Silence is often enforced. Conversation may be limited or prohibited entirely, depending on the facility. Food quality aside, the act of eating itself is regulated. Time is limited. Portions are fixed. Seating is assigned or restricted. In some facilities, inmates eat in their cells. In others, they eat in a dining hall under constant supervision. The environment is loud but controlled. Every movement is visible. Every interaction is monitored. There is no lingering. When time is up, trays are collected and movement ends. Whether an inmate is finished eating or not does not matter. The schedule moves on. This is another lesson prison teaches early. Personal needs do not override institutional timing. After breakfast, the day fragments into assignments. Some inmates go to work details, kitchen, laundry, maintenance, sanitation. Others go to programs. Many return to their cells to wait. Work assignments are not chosen. They are given. Refusing them is not an option without consequence. Even the concept of free time is misleading. When inmates are not actively working or programmed, they are still under control. Recreation, when permitted, happens at specific times, in specific areas, under specific rules. Yard time can be canceled without notice. Entire units can be locked down for reasons inmates may never learn. This unpredictability reinforces dependence on the system. By mid-morning, the psychological effects of the routine begin to show. Fatigue sets in, not physical exhaustion, but mental weariness. The constant need to listen, comply, wait, and adapt drains attention and emotional energy. This is not accidental. Prison routines are designed to occupy the mind just enough to prevent rebellion, but not enough to provide fulfillment. The result is a state of controlled stagnation, days full of activity that go nowhere. Inmates learn to measure time differently, not by hours, but by counts, by meals, by doors opening and closing, morning count, midday count, evening count, final count. Each one reinforces the same message. You are still here, and the system still controls you. By the end of the morning, most inmates are already mentally worn down, not from violence, not from confrontation, but from constant regulation. Every decision has been made for them, every movement dictated, every pause enforced. And this is only the beginning of the day. What makes this system so effective is that it does not feel dramatic. There are no alarms, no shouting, no chaos, just repetition, structure, routine, day after day. This is how control becomes normal. This is how autonomy fades quietly. And this is how a normal prison day starts doing its real work, long before anyone realizes it's happening. By the time the morning settles inside a U.S. prison, the system has already established dominance. The wake-up call is over. Count has cleared. Breakfast has come and gone. And now the day moves into what appears, on the surface, to be its most normal phase. Work assignments, movement, and routine activity. This is where many outsiders make a critical mistake. They assume that prison work exists to rehabilitate inmates, teach responsibility, or help pass time. While those explanations exist on paper, they are not the primary function of prison labor or scheduled movement. The real purpose is control. Work in prison is not about productivity. It is about structure. It is about exhaustion. It is about obedience. Once an inmate is assigned a job, it becomes part of their identity inside the institution. Kitchen worker, porter, laundry, grounds crew, maintenance, sanitation. These roles are not requested. They are assigned. Declining them is treated not as preference, but as defiance. And defiance has consequences. An inmate who refuses work may lose privileges, face disciplinary action, or be confined to their cell for extended periods. In some facilities, refusing work can even affect parole eligibility. The message is clear: participation is mandatory, even when the job itself seems meaningless. In many prisons, inmates spend hours performing repetitive tasks with little visible purpose. Floors are cleaned that will be dirty again within minutes. Laundry is folded only to be unfolded and redistributed. Trash is collected, sorted, moved, and collected again. Efficiency is not the point. Compliance is. Movement to work assignments is tightly controlled. Inmates are released from their cells in groups, often called runs. Doors open and close electronically. Officers monitor each release. Inmates move only when told and stop exactly where instructed. There is no wandering. Hallways are narrow, loud, and deliberately designed to limit interaction. Lines form. Commands are given. Silence is enforced or strongly encouraged. Any deviation, stepping out of line, slowing down, looking the wrong way, draws attention. And attention is dangerous. In prison, being noticed is rarely a good thing. Inmates learn to move efficiently, quietly, and predictably. The goal is to blend into the system without triggering it. This constant regulation creates what many inmates describe as mental compression. The day feels full, yet empty. Busy, yet stagnant. Every hour is accounted for, but nothing belongs to you. Even those not assigned to work are not free. Inmates without jobs are often confined to their housing units for most of the day. They wait for movement that may never come. Recreation might be scheduled or canceled. Programs might be announced or postponed indefinitely. Again, explanations are optional. This uncertainty is one of the system's most powerful tools. When inmates cannot rely on schedules, they stop planning. When planning disappears, agency disappears with it. Lunch approaches, but not everyone eats at the same time. Meals are staggered, divided by unit, security level, or work assignment. Some inmates eat early. Others wait. Some eat quickly. Others barely have time to sit down. In many facilities, lunch is treated as a logistical necessity, not a break. The act of eating remains controlled. Trays are distributed. Portions are standardized. Time is limited. Conversation is monitored. The atmosphere is tense but quiet. Hundreds of people moving, sitting, and standing under constant supervision. When time is called, trays are collected, regardless of whether the meal is finished. Then movement resumes. After lunch, the day often enters its most psychologically difficult phase. Fatigue sets in. The initial energy of the morning is gone, replaced by a dull awareness of how much time remains. The hours stretch. Work continues. Waiting continues. The system grinds forward. This is where the illusion of choice becomes most effective. Inmates may be allowed to choose between limited options: yard or cell, program or work detail, television or books. But these choices exist within a rigid framework. They are not freedom. They are options within confinement. The system allows just enough decision-making to create the feeling of participation without ever surrendering control. Even recreation is regulated. Yard time, when allowed, happens in enclosed spaces surrounded by fences, towers, and cameras. Inmates are watched constantly. Movement is limited. Time is fixed. Yard can be canceled for weather, staffing shortages, or security concerns, sometimes without notice. When it is canceled, inmates return to their cells. No appeal. No explanation. This unpredictability reinforces the central lesson of prison life. Nothing is guaranteed. By mid-afternoon, many inmates experience what is known informally as dead time. The hours between scheduled activities feel longer than they are. The mind drifts. Anxiety builds. Irritation grows. This is not accidental. The prison day is structured to create a sense of slow pressure. Not enough stimulation to engage the mind. Not enough rest to recover. Just enough activity to prevent rebellion. This balance keeps the system stable. Throughout the day, counts continue. Officers stop movement. Inmates freeze in place. Bodies are counted again and again. These interruptions remind everyone that no matter what activity is happening, it can be halted instantly. Control always comes first. By the end of the afternoon, inmates are already anticipating lockdown. Not because they want it, but because it is predictable. In a day filled with uncertainty, lockdown is one of the few events that always happens. That says everything about the psychology of prison life. When confinement becomes the most reliable part of your day, the system has already succeeded. And still, the most restrictive hours have not yet begun. By the time the afternoon arrives inside a U.S. prison, the physical part of the day is mostly over. The work details have slowed or ended. Lunch is finished. Movement becomes more limited. And on the surface, the prison appears calmer, quieter, less active. But this is where the day becomes most difficult. Afternoon in prison is not a break. It is a psychological test. This is the part of the day where time stretches, patience thins, and the weight of confinement becomes impossible to ignore. For many inmates, these hours are harder than the morning and more exhausting than work itself. Because now, there is nothing left to distract the mind. The body may be tired, but the day is not close to finished. Lockdown is still hours away. Dinner has not arrived. Count is coming again. And the inmate is forced to sit with the reality of where they are and how little control they have over what happens next. This is when tension builds. In housing units across the country, inmates return to their cells or day rooms depending on security level. Some facilities allow limited movement during the afternoon. Others restrict inmates to their cells entirely. The rules vary, but the effect is the same. Waiting becomes the primary activity. There is no official schedule posted for this part of the day. There is no clear sense of how long things will last. Doors may open briefly, or not at all. Officers may announce movement, or remain silent. Inmates learn quickly that asking questions rarely helps. Wait becomes the only answer. This uncertainty is one of the most effective psychological tools in the prison system. When people don't know what to expect, their stress levels rise. When stress rises, patience shortens. When patience shortens, mistakes happen. And mistakes in prison carry consequences. During the afternoon hours, minor infractions are more likely. Arguments start over small issues. Frustration leaks out in subtle ways. Tone of voice, body language, silence. Officers are trained to watch for this shift. They know this is when tensions spike. That's why supervision often increases during these hours. More patrols, more observation, more intervention. The goal is not comfort, it is containment. Many inmates describe the afternoon as the moment when prison feels smallest. The walls seem closer. The noise becomes sharper. Every sound, a door slamming, a radio crackling, an argument down the tier, feels amplified. The mind has too much space and nowhere to go. Some inmates try to sleep. Others pace their cells. Some read the same pages over and over without absorbing anything. Others stare at the wall or the floor, waiting for time to move. But time in prison does not move smoothly. It drags. It stalls. It resists. This is when the system does some of its most effective work. Because the prison does not need to actively punish during these hours. It simply lets the structure do its job. The lack of stimulation, the lack of choice, the lack of meaningful activity, all of it presses inward. In higher security facilities, afternoon movement may be eliminated entirely. Inmates remain locked in their cells, sometimes for hours at a time. Meals are delayed. Recreation is canceled. Count is announced, then postponed. Every delay reinforces the same message. The schedule belongs to the institution, not you. For inmates in dorm-style housing, the afternoon brings a different kind of pressure. Dozens, or even hundreds of people confined in a shared space, all experiencing the same boredom, the same fatigue, the same frustration. Noise rises. Tempers flare. Small conflicts escalate. Correctional staff are aware of this dynamic. That's why rules are enforced more strictly during these hours. Any sign of disorder is addressed quickly. The system cannot allow afternoon frustration to turn into evening chaos. Dinner approaches, but again, nothing is certain. Mealtimes are staggered. Units are called when staff decide they are ready. Some inmates eat early. Others wait long past the scheduled hour. The delay becomes part of the punishment, not officially, but practically. Hunger sharpens emotions, and the system knows it. When dinner finally arrives, it is not relief. It is another controlled process. Line up. Move forward. Sit when told. Eat quickly. Do not linger. Trays collected. Movement ends. The day continues. By now, most inmates are mentally exhausted. Not from labor, not from confrontation, but from sustained regulation. Every hour has demanded attention. Every movement has required compliance. Every delay has chipped away at patience. This is when many inmates experience what they describe as emotional flattening. They stop reacting. They stop expecting. They stop caring. Not because they are calm, but because caring takes energy, and energy has been drained all day. This emotional shutdown is not accidental. A system that runs on control benefits from people who no longer push back. From people who accept routine as unavoidable. From people who stop imagining alternatives. As evening approaches, inmates begin preparing for lockdown. Not physically, mentally. They know what comes next. Final movements. Final count. Doors closing for the night. The return to the cell. The return to isolation, even in shared housing. Lockdown is both feared and anticipated. Feared because it removes the last remaining movement of the day. anticipated because it is predictable. That contradiction defines prison life. When the most restrictive part of the day feels like stability, the system has fully asserted control. And yet, even now, the day is not finished. Because the final hours, the transition into lockdown and the silence that follows, carry their own weight. And that is where the pressure becomes unavoidable. As evening settles over a U.S. prison, the institution begins to tighten its grip. This is the point in the day when everything narrows: movement, sound, freedom, and thought. The prison does not announce this transition clearly. It doesn't need to. Every inmate knows the signals. The pace slows. Commands become shorter. Doors open less often. Officers shift positions. The system is preparing to shut the day down. Dinner is not a moment of comfort. It is a checkpoint. By this point, inmates are already mentally drained. Hunger has built through the afternoon. Fatigue has set in. Patience is thin. And the prison uses this moment deliberately. Meals are served efficiently, sometimes cold, sometimes rushed, sometimes late. The experience is designed to be functional, not restorative. There is no gathering, no shared relief, no sense of closure. In many facilities, dinner is the last time inmates leave their cells until morning. That knowledge hangs over the meal. Conversations are short. Movement is quick. I stay forward. Everyone understands that mistakes now carry heavier consequences. Because lockdown is coming. After dinner, the prison shifts into its most controlled phase. Movement is restricted to a minimum. Units are closed one by one. Doors lock behind inmates with mechanical finality. The sound of steel meeting steel echoes down hallways, tier by tier. This is not dramatic. It is routine. And that is what makes it so powerful. Once inside their cells, inmates wait again. Final count has not yet happened, and until it clears, nothing else matters. The entire institution pauses. Every body must be accounted for. Every door must be secure. Every inmate must be visible and still. Final count is the most important count of the day. Officers move slowly and deliberately. Flashlights cut through dim light. Radios crackle quietly. The atmosphere changes. Even seasoned inmates feel the tension rise. A single mistake, a missing inmate, an unclear visual, a delayed response, can lock down an entire facility for hours. Inmates stand, hands visible, bodies positioned exactly as required. There is no talking, no shifting, no shortcuts. Everyone understands the stakes. Final count is not just a head count. It is a demonstration of total control. When count clears, the prison exhales, but inmates do not. Because now comes the longest part of the day. Lockdown. Cells close. Lights dim, but rarely turn off completely. Silence settles unevenly, broken only by distant voices, coughing, metal sounds, or the occasional echo of footsteps. For inmates in shared cells, space becomes tighter. For those alone, isolation becomes heavier. This is when the mind has nowhere left to go. There is no more movement, no more tasks, no more distraction, just time. Hours stretch forward, empty and unavoidable. The body may be exhausted, but sleep does not come easily. The mind replays the day, the routine, the commands, the waiting, the compliance, the quiet humiliations that never appear in reports. This is where the psychological weight of prison hits hardest. During lockdown, inmates are forced to confront their lack of control directly. There is no illusion of choice left. No decision-making. No movement. Even basic needs must wait until morning. If someone feels sick, they wait. If someone feels overwhelmed, they wait. If someone feels unsafe, they wait. The system does not bend easily at night. This enforced stillness creates a unique kind of pressure. Thoughts grow louder. Regrets surface. Anxiety builds. For some inmates, this is when anger rises. For others, it's despair. For many, it's numbness. And the prison allows all of it. Because nothing needs to be done. The doors are locked. The counts are clear. The system is satisfied. What outsiders rarely understand is how loud prison can be at night. Not in sound, but in presence. Every noise feels amplified. Every movement carries weight. Even breathing can feel restricted when space is limited and silence is enforced. In shared housing, conflicts simmer quietly. Inmates lie awake, inches apart, listening, thinking, waiting. In single cells, isolation deepens. The walls feel closer. The ceiling lower. The air heavier. This is where time stops behaving normally. Minutes feel like hours. Hours feel endless. There is no clock that matters, no schedule to follow, no marker of progress except exhaustion. And yet, sleep is not guaranteed. Lights may stay on all night. Noise may interrupt rest. Counts may happen unexpectedly. Officers may shine flashlights into cells without warning. The system remains alert, even when inmates are expected to shut down. This constant low-level surveillance prevents true rest. Even in sleep, inmates are not fully off duty. By the middle of the night, many inmates drift in and out of consciousness, never fully resting, never fully awake. The body tries to recover, but the environment resists it. This cumulative exhaustion carries into the next day, and that is intentional. A tired mind is easier to manage. A worn-down body resists less. A predictable routine replaces resistance with resignation. By morning, the cycle will begin again. Lights on, commands shouted, count enforced, and the inmate will wake up already behind, already drained, already controlled. This is how a normal day in prison ends. Not with chaos, not with violence, but with silence, stillness, and the quiet understanding that tomorrow will be exactly the same. And yet, there is one final stage of the day that cannot be controlled by schedule alone. The part that happens inside the mind. When the doors finally lock and the prison settles into night, most people assume the day is over. From the outside, it looks that way. The lights are dimmed. Movement has stopped. Paperwork is finished. The institution appears calm, orderly, quiet. But for inmates, this is not the end of the day. It is the part that lasts the longest. Night inside a U.S. prison is where the effects of the entire day collect and sink in. It is where exhaustion meets awareness, where routine turns into realization, and where the cost of a normal prison day becomes unavoidable. Sleep inside prison is not rest. It is survival. Even when inmates lie down, the system never fully releases them. Lights often remain on at low levels. Noise never completely disappears. Radios crackle. Doors clang in distant units. Someone coughs. Someone shouts in their sleep. Somewhere, metal scrapes concrete. And throughout the night, the possibility of interruption always exists. Counts may happen at irregular hours. Officers may shine flashlights into cells. Doors may open unexpectedly. Emergencies elsewhere in the facility can ripple outward, disturbing entire units. This constant alertness prevents deep rest. The body may shut down, but the mind stays guarded. Over time, this fragmented sleep changes how inmates think, feel, and react. Concentration weakens. Memory fades. Emotional regulation becomes harder. Small frustrations feel overwhelming. Patience disappears faster. This is not a side effect. It is a predictable outcome. A system built on control benefits from fatigue. A tired population is less likely to organize, resist, or challenge authority. When every day ends with incomplete rest, every morning begins with a disadvantage. And then the cycle repeats. Lights on. Commands issued. Count enforced. The inmate wakes up already behind, already drained, already adapting. This repetition is the true punishment of prison. Not the sentence length written on paper, but the thousands of identical days stacked on top of each other. At first, inmates notice the routine clearly. They mark time. They count days. They remember specific moments. But as weeks turn into months, something shifts. Days begin to blur. One wake-up call feels like the next. One count merges into another. Meals lose distinction. Conversations repeat. The sense of progression disappears. This is where long-term psychological damage begins. Human beings are not designed to live without variation, without agency, without meaningful control over time. When those elements are removed, the mind adapts, but not without cost. Some inmates become hypercompliant. They follow rules perfectly, avoid attention, and minimize interaction. Others grow irritable, withdrawn, or emotionally flat. Many oscillate between anger and numbness. These are not personality flaws. They are responses to environment. A normal prison day teaches the brain that effort does not change outcome. Whether you hurry or wait, comply or question, the schedule remains the same. Over time, this creates a state known as learned helplessness, a condition where individuals stop trying to influence their circumstances because past attempts have failed. This mindset does not stay inside prison. It follows inmates after release. Former prisoners often struggle with basic decision-making. Choosing when to eat, sleep, or move can feel overwhelming. Unstructured time causes anxiety. Silence feels uncomfortable. Freedom itself becomes stressful because the system trained them not to expect control. This is the hidden cost of a normal prison day, the part rarely addressed in policy debates or documentaries focused only on violence or overcrowding. The damage is subtle, cumulative, quiet, and it happens even in prisons without extreme conditions, even in facilities that are considered well-run. Because the issue is not abuse. It is design. A system that controls time, movement, and choice every single day will inevitably change the people living inside it. That change may be useful to the institution, order, predictability, compliance, but it carries long-term consequences for individuals and society. Night after night, inmates lie awake thinking about the same things. How much time is left? How many days remain? How many times this routine will repeat? And each night, the answer is the same. Tomorrow will be another normal day. The lights will come on. The count will happen. The doors will open and close. The system will continue. This is why understanding a normal prison day matters. Not because it is dramatic, not because it is extreme, but because it is ordinary. Ordinary control, ordinary repetition, ordinary erosion of autonomy. And when that ordinary day is repeated hundreds or thousands of times, it becomes something powerful, something lasting, something that does not end when the sentence does. This is the reality behind the phrase, doing time. It is not just time passing. It is time shaping the mind. When people talk about prison, they usually talk about sentences. 5 years, 10 years, life. They talk about crimes, verdicts, and punishment as if time itself is the only thing being taken away. But after walking through a normal day inside a U.S. prison, hour by hour, count by count, door by door, it becomes clear that prison takes far more than time. It takes control. What we've seen is not a rare institution or an extreme case. It is the everyday reality of incarceration across the United States. A system built not on constant force, but on structure. Not on chaos, but on repetition. Not on violence, but on routine. A normal prison day begins before an inmate is ready and ends long after the body is exhausted. Every decision is made in advance. Every movement is regulated. Every pause is enforced. And over time, that structure reshapes how people think, react, and exist. This is how prison maintains order without needing constant confrontation. By controlling the clock, by controlling space, by controlling expectation. When inmates no longer decide when to wake, eat, move, speak, or sleep, autonomy fades quietly. Resistance becomes costly. Compliance becomes survival. And eventually, the routine feels inevitable. That is the most powerful part of the system. Not that it hurts all the time, but that it feels permanent. Day after day, the same pattern repeats. Wake up, count, work, waiting, meals, lockdown, night, and then again. Weeks blur into months. Months blur into years. The calendar moves forward, but inside, everything stays the same. This repetition leaves marks that do not always show on paper. It changes how people handle silence, how they respond to uncertainty, how they make decisions, how they experience freedom. For many who leave prison, the structure doesn't disappear when the gates open. It lingers. Unstructured time feels dangerous. Choices feel overwhelming. The absence of commands creates anxiety instead of relief. Because the system trained the mind to function under control. Understanding this doesn't mean excusing crime. It doesn't mean ignoring victims. And it doesn't mean pretending prison has no purpose. It means acknowledging reality. A normal prison day is not neutral. It is not passive. It is not harmless. It is an active process, one that shapes behavior, identity, and psychology over time. And if society expects people to return from prison changed, then it must understand what is doing the changing. Not just the sentence, not just the walls, but the day itself, the quiet discipline, the endless waiting, the controlled silence, the repetition that teaches the same lesson over and over again. You do not own your time anymore. That is the real weight of incarceration, not just being locked away, but living inside a system where normal is designed to control you from morning to night. And once you see that clearly, the idea of a normal prison day never sounds normal again. Thanks for watching. Like, share, and subscribe.